Hello, welcome to the Star Wars Order 66 Sons of the Order podcast. I'm Lainey. Thank you for joining us.
And I'm Chuck.
I'm Joey.
I'm Liam.
Jeff.
I'm James.
All right.
Creep factor just went up.
Welcome to episode 3, everybody.
Episode 3. What was episode 3?
Revenge of the Sith.
Oh, gosh.
Well, I just got to wait a minute. I just got to clear up one thing. I was told I was breathing too much in episode 1. So our audience of 13 can come up with either two conclusions about me. Number 1, I'm a pervert. Or number 2, I drink heavily. Or 3, I'm a severe asthmatic. Or 4, all of the above.
We'll just cut your air supply from here on
Okay,
out.
thank you.
Wow, what a great way to start this podcast off. Everyone's so excited. So, what happened in the store this week?
We got a great delivery yesterday and the day before that.
We did get a great delivery.
Well, on the previous episode, we mentioned that Vlix was in transit.
He's here.
Vlix has arrived.
He's here.
Vlix has arrived,
Yeah.
which is pretty amazing. Came all the way from Brazil. Vlix, for those of you that don't know what a Vlix is,
The Vlix is the Glasslight Brazilian droids figure release that was a very rare release just before the line got cut off. Less than 20 exist. This is a loose example. It's been AFA graded. It's a beautiful figure.
actually authenticated also
It is. It is
by
known as
CIB.
known as the rarest figure in the world.
So, for those of you that are looking to complete your Star Wars collection and think that you might have all of the existing figures out there, including the Ewoks and the droids line, this is the one that you're probably missing.
And Jeff and Chuck, it's not just the most rare of Star Wars toys. It's number 1 of all toys, correct?
All action figures. It is the rarest.
Which
Okay.
is,
It
which
is
is
ranked
pretty amazing.
number 1. Yes.
So if we didn't say it already, Vlix's new home is at 111 South Chestnut in sunny downtown McKinney, Texas, at Order 66 Toys.
Along with a lot of 12-back figures that have just come in. There's almost 2 complete sets of the original 12-back figures.
Almost 2 complete, fully graded
Yeah.
That's
AFA
correct,
sets,
yeah.
which is really pretty amazing. The best set grades AFA 80/85s, which is incredible.
Yeah, that's near mint.
They came to my house. They were delivered to my house, was it yesterday? And I called, I got home from work and it was, already inside. I was told we had another package. And Robert, my son, who's a big Star Wars fan, he was just champing at the bit for me to open it up. And I called you, and Chuck was with you, and opened the box up. And I've seen the other carded figures that we've had, and then I looked at these 5 that were 80/85s. And I'm telling you, again, as a person that is not the biggest Star Wars person at this table, or probably definitely in this store, I was knocked out about how pristine and beautiful they looked. They're 38 years old, and they could have been just taken off the store shelf yesterday.
That's what's amazing about
Yeah.
them.
You'd be hard-pressed to find any better examples out
Beautiful.
Well, even when I looked at them, and as you all know, here at the table and at the store, I'm an incredibly hard grader. I think I've been told that a couple times. But these, I seriously had any. There was no way I was going to find any fault with them. The bubbles are beautiful. The cards are flat, very glossy. The last set that we got in have never had the punch holes punched.
Yeah.
The hanger punches.
That's right.
punched.
They were unpunched, weren't they?
They were unpunched.
Yeah.
No sticker residue. No stickers. It's real common to find a 12 back that might have 2 or 3 stickers on it, and then it's been discounted down to $1 something. Or
88 cents.
88 cents, yes.
Monkey War.
But these were just absolutely amazing. So
It's hard to believe that they're like over 30 years old.
30, almost 38 years old. And what we were talking about this, some of those figures over there, Elvis was still alive. Well, I know there's some people out there probably still think Elvis is alive, but Elvis was still technically alive to everybody. And Carter was president, and you start thinking about all of that
John
back
Lennon.
then. John Lennon was alive, and now look, I mean, you know how that's 38 years, and they look like they just came off the shelf. It's amazing. It's
And
brilliant.
One of the questions that I had was, these things are valuable because they're so rare. Because back then, I mean, same thing can go for comic books. These vintage action figures, they didn't have any value to people back then, so they didn't think to really take care of them or hold on to them for any kind of monetary gain or anything. So, Jeff, since you've been in this business and collecting for so long, what is going through these people's minds that do have these pristine figures that they've kept in such good shape for so many years? Like, if there is no value to them back then, why take care of them so well?
Well, coming from a comic book background, and same thing with Chuck, as Chuck well knows, one of the most well-known and famous collections of all time was the collection that back in the 60s Chuck Rosansky with Mile High Comics found. And that was the collection out of Denver. So this is a little bit different, but we'll bring it back around. It was a comic book collection that was found in the early 60s with just tons of vintage golden age comic books in it. They were of absolutely the highest quality that you could ever find. Well, what made them so rare was, one, they were in the environment of being in Colorado, where it was very cool. These items weren't exposed to all of the heat. They weren't exposed to the sun. And what it was, if I remember correctly, it was a gentleman that's family was a barber, and they would get these comic books in once a week, or he would buy them off the shelf, and after reading them one time, just put them in a stack. And they were found at this gentleman's house in the 60s, so probably 20, 30 years later, and one of just about every comic from 1938 all the way up, and then to that time in the early 60s. When Chuck found them, he realized what kind of beautiful condition they were in, and of course had them kept, and thus becoming the Mile High collection.
I think what's important, though, to tell the listeners out there is that there has always been people that have preserved things, adults that have preserved things from their childhood. There are people that have grown up watching the original serials with, like, say, Flash Gordon, Buck Rogers, listening to the radio broadcast. So by the time that they're, in their adult years, they're part of the workforce, they see something like Star Wars come out, and it is a revolutionary, way to enjoy the whole sci-fi space exploration genre. So to an adult, these really meant something. Not as far as monetary value. We could say, okay, well, this figure is worth, $4,000. This figure is worth $400. They're worth a lot to them as a collector, so they're preserved, and that's why they're unpunched. They did circulate the figures in displays, not on always on pegs. Kenner actually had some store displays that they would put at the end of the aisle that were just a cardboard display that stood up on its own.
Very
and
true.
It would actually have a shelf in it, and there would be 24 figures lined up that would sit in a little slot. And those are some of the best ones that would be preserved because they were never put on pegs, they were never punched, they didn't have a lot of bending going on because they were pushed against the rack. So collectors that found those and preserved them, that's why we have some of these great examples now that are near mint.
One story that I've heard recently, just being here in the store, is a friend of ours, Arturo Vargas, who's one of the biggest Boba Fett collectors in the United States now. You can find them on rebelscum.com. But Arturo was from Mexico, still from Mexico, of course, and his mother actually took some of his vintage figures, and it was during his birthday, and gave him a couple at his birthday party, put some up on the top shelf in their house, in their kitchen, and then promptly forgot about them. So Arturo went back to his home in Mexico, found these figures, and one of the figures that he found was what became one of the rarest of all of the Star Wars figures, and it was a Mexican version, and I always mispronounce this. It's somebody help me. The Layla D or Lily Lady.
Lily Lady, yeah.
Lily Lady.
El Bobo Fett.
El Boba Fett.
El Bobo Fett.
But
That's basically the Mexican Star Wars figures.
yeah, this was a Mexican Star Wars figure. But what happened was this was like a transition piece that actually has a loose rocket. So everyone's looking at the rare rocket-firing Boba Fett. Guys, please don't tell me that you have this figure. It doesn't exist. The rocket-firing Boba Fett was a prototype only. The only way you could get it was out of Cincinnati with Kenner, and there's so few of those that even exist. But this transition piece is fantastic. And Arturo, I think he's been offered $40,000 for this piece so far. So it's a big money item.
You're aiding to of destroying one of the myths out there, one of the urban legends out there, just like Santa Claus.
It is an urban legend. That's correct.
I'm serious. I'm truly serious, because back in 1980, when the Boba Fett figure was released through the mailer, it was widely known, even amongst all the children, myself, collecting these figures, that there was a kid out there that swallowed the rocket, and it got immediately pulled from the shelves, and everybody was scrambling trying to find the one that still had the spring-loaded rocket to have that coveted figure. Of course, it does not exist. It exists in prototypes. It was never actually released from Kenner. It was made, but it was just never released to the general public at all. But that's one of those myths that really needs to be intact, because there's still so many people that hold on to that part of their childhood where that was such a big thing. Just like the razor blades and the candy bars. It goes side by side with that, except it has a much better happy ending after it, other than the kid swallowing the rocket. But I always would look at everyone trying their Boba Fett to see if it actually would fire or the missile would come out, because it was actually also believed that depending on which version you had, which rocket would do what, because they told us back then, the general public, that the rockets were glued in. That all they did was they glued the rockets in. And it wasn't until much later that, being in the know, being in the toy business for so long, and the whole genre of comic books and everything, that it does not exist.
So what you're saying is Santa Claus does not exist.
No, I'm saying that he's trying to.
But
he's alive and well, but lives in Cincinnati.
Okay.
I do love razor blades with candy bars. That's a nice combination.
I'm hearing you proposing that there could be a whole load of rocket-firing Boba Fett's in a landfill somewhere, like the E.T. cartridge.
I am proposing that, just to keep the dream alive.
It's sad. I mean, that you talk about. It's wonderful to hear these stories about parents hanging on to things. Or in my family, I mean, I had comics from the 50s and 60s. This is back in the 60s. And my mom was always wanting me to get rid of them because, in her mind, they weren't good for me. They were a waste of time. It was kind of that old-time religion type of thing. They were not good for you, and which really helped me with my reading. I mean,
absolutely.
And so we moved to Dirty R, Rockwall, represent, and we lived out in the country, and we had to burn our trash. So this is probably about 1972, 73. My mom simply got all my collection of my 50s and 60s comic books that I loved dearly, and she took them out there and burned them.
Oh no.
Well, this
So, you know,
this is again a good segue to bring it back around to why those Star Wars figures, and in that kind of condition, why they're so valuable. And it's because some were damaged, many were thrown out. What's the first thing that you do when you open a toy up? Well, you
Throw away the packaging.
Yeah, throw away the packaging. You rip open the bubble, take the figure out.
But I had an aha moment, and it was not too long ago. You know what one of the greatest things that exists to preserving collectibles is? Birthday parties. You know why? Because you get 2 R2-D2s, and you get 3 C-3POs, and you already got it. So what ends up happening is it goes up on a shelf or in a closet somewhere and gets tucked away. And that's how you get a 38-year-old figure that's
Absolutely.
never opened.
That's what happened to Arturo. And he was just lucky enough that where he lived at the time was not incredibly hot. It was well preserved inside of a cupboard
And
was not exposed to that.
And for the original 12 figures that came out, the original 12 backs, I've been thinking about this a lot. One of the other things that helped those figures, or at least 4 of them, is the early bird kit.
Absolutely.
Because, a lot of the ones that wouldn't have been bought up, if you already had R2-D2 and Luke and Chewie and Leia from the early bird kit, those are going to hang around on the shelf because you've already got them. And the general public at the time, because the figures were so hard to get, once they got their little tray in, well, the parents weren't going to buy them those 4 figures. So they would stay on the rack. So a lot of the ones that you see that are 12 backs seem to be, around those 4. So it makes the other 8 a little bit more juicy to find.
When you got in your early bird mailer, when you actually received it, did those come in on cards, or were they just like in
No,
boxes?
It came in a little white plastic tray.
Okay.
It kind of looked like a TV dinner. They actually did was it 2006? They did a
Right.
an
Or 05 or
homage to
06.
that. 05 or 06. Again, we need a fact checker. And just since we're on the subject of fact checking, Jeffrey was right. It is only 107 issues to the original Star Wars comic. So those of you who listened to episode 1, it is 1 to 107 of the original Star Wars Marvel comic. Thank you, Jeffrey, for providing that information.
and the answer to the breathing was a pervert. We have someone here, a special guest with us today.
Not a special guest.
Well, not a special guest. He's an incredibly intelligent young man.
He's an employee too.
He's an employee, and his
Well, wait a
his
sec.
head just grew to about an 8.5 size. But
So go ahead and introduce yourself.
this I was going to introduce him.
Oh, go ahead and introduce him.
But anyway, all right. Here's Liam. He's just a brilliant young man with a great sense of humor, and just wanted to introduce him to everybody out there. Hello, Liam.
Hello.
Okay, that's enough with Liam. Now, Liam actually started off as one of our interns,
Or Padawans.
one of our Padawan learners. We were
not a
talking.
Jedi yet.
He's not quite a Jedi. He's,
Well, now
he's-
I am the master.
yeah, right.
He's also a smartass.
His midichlorian count is off the chain.
About 2.
but,
It's about a 2.
Yep.
And he's
No.
sitting
It's a-
across from the table as far away because he likes
Yeah.
to debate things that I seem to bring up on podcasts.
Yeah.
For
We
those
won't
of
talk
you
about
that
them.
have never heard the Lost episodes and probably never will, they do have some interesting information on
There's a
them.
debate about Godzilla, the remake.
Yes.
That
Godzilla. Don't say the G word either.
yeah.
Yeah, that's a hot button.
But why do we have Liam here today? Were we going to talk about movies or something like that, or what were we going to talk about?
well,
concerning-
he actually, due to a commitment with school, missed the first 2 episodes. So we wanted to get him back involved. He's always been one of our favorite Padawans here. Liam actually put in many hours,
Almost 200.
almost 200 hours, unpaid hours, as an intern here at the store, even before he became the
Yeah,
brilliant.
right.
That's what you get for working in a right-to-work state.
Yeah.
Sorry, no unions here. So yeah.
Ouch. You gotta love Texas.
Oh, I do. I love Texas. They just I won't get
Except for
into
the
politics.
drivers.
We're so far off course right now.
Yes, let's get back to what we're talking about. Let's talk about. So, I guess we're going to talk about whose favorite film.
Well,
it
we
is?
were going to talk about movies today, and I guess with our resident expert here, Liam,
Yeah.
we were going to start the conversation off with of the original. Well, of the 6 that's out.
7 if you
Absolutely,
count
because you
Clone Wars.
can't discredit my favorite movie.
Oh no, we have to say. Well, how many are there?
Well, there's the 6 originals, and then if you want to get technical, you can count the Clone Wars movie because it is a theatrical release.
And if you're going to do that, you have to include the holiday special.
holiday
That's a
special,
television program.
And the
Holiday
two
spe-
Ewoks.
holiday
That is
special,
a television program.
holiday
It does not
special.
count.
The 2 Ewok movies were television movies. However, the Clone Wars film was a theatrical release. in
It was
2008.
because I took
Okay,
my
so
son
we
to
keeping
it.
this.
Yeah.
So our question of the day that we were going to bring up for the podcast is, what is your favorite episode, and support it with facts. So we'll start off with Liam.
It's funny when we get into this debate because there's lots of supporters, but I would say the original Star Wars is my favorite. The original Star Wars, not only outside, even if you don't like the film, you have to acknowledge that it is one of the most influential films of all time. And certainly the 70s was one of the most influential film decades of all time. You had the 2 Godfather films, you had Taxi Driver, you had Network. But Star Wars really, because pre-Star Wars, the science fiction film community was very much the 2001, the Silent Running, more philosophical. You didn't have films like the Buck Rogers or the Flash Gordon serials. And Star Wars really, not only did it reinvent it, but George Lucas drew off of mythology. He drew off of Seven Samurai and the Kurosawa westerns, or the samurai films. He drew off westerns as well, The Good, the Bad, the Ugly. And it really was an amalgamation of all these different genres to come and create what was at the time the biggest film of all time. And I think, not only is it just so influential, I just think it's the story and how such a complete story the film was, because it painted the lines of good and evil in a way that was so simple but also so complex at the same time. It really, it wasn't just like the westerns where you had the white hats for the good guys, the black hats for the bad guys. Just the way it used the Force as really a definition of good and evil was, I think, completely influential. And you'd be damned to find a filmmaker out here today that was not influenced by Star Wars. You get all these, like David Fincher was an intern at Lucasfilm. Obviously, J.J. Abrams, who's directing The Force Awakens, was a huge fan growing up. Christopher Nolan, Paul Thomas Anderson. A lot of these famous filmmakers are filmmakers today because of what a big influence the original film was.
So for those women out there, he is available, and he is 16 years old.
Yes, that's legal in Texas.
Wow, Liam.
Gotta love
And-
Texas.
I'm actually going to support Liam for a second, and I have a different answer. It's my favorite, but
I understand
you
that.
know what? Back in 1990, they did a time capsule for whoever inherits this planet, if we're all gone, or no matter what happens. And in the time capsule, they put a lot of different components of our culture, videos and stuff, and they picked 10 movies to go in the time capsule. And all the first 9 films that they put in there were things like
Citizen Kane.
Maltese Falcon,
Wizard of Oz.
Gone with the Wind, Wizard of Oz. Do you know that the 10th film and only the 10th film was a modern movie, and the one film that they picked was Star Wars?
Yeah, and that was don't mean to interrupt here, but when one of the first reviewers or film critics to come out at the time and really praise Star Wars was Roger Ebert. And in his review, one of the first things he said is,
Wow.
well,
Number one.
Well, he said, a century from now, there's going to be films we're going to remember, like Casablanca, Citizen Kane, the Buster Keaton films, and Star Wars, I think, is going to be definitely one of them. And it's just funny seeing 38 years from now how much of an influence it has. And I think even without some of the critical success, or even without like the continuation of just the line through the prequels, I think it still would have been influential just for what it did for not only reinventing the sci-fi genre, but reinventing the adventure genre.
I certainly could not say it like you, because you are a lot smarter than I am, number one. And number two, T1, T2. Number two, you do reviews for
I do.
movies and whatnot. But I was kind of on the same plane when we were talking about Star Wars, I guess in episode 2 or whatever, whenever we were talking about the movie, is that I saw the movie industry, and you mentioned some really great movies from the 70s, like The Godfather and all.
Taxi Driver.
But I was starting to see, though, in the movie industry, sort of a decline.
Definitely.
And it's just like The Wizard of Oz, where you go from black and white to color. When Star Wars came out in '77, it was like everything went from black and white to color. It was
Right.
a new era. It was a new dawn. It changed the movie industry, and it was fun to go to movies again.
Exactly. And I think if you look at like some of the box office after Star Wars, just the science fiction genre was going up, but it was also just movies in general were just going up because people were excited about it. And like even though in terms of money made, it's not going to be one of the higher these days, but if you look at the per tickets film scores, I believe it's number 2 right now, or number 3 I think, behind Gone with the Wind and Avatar, for just the amount of tickets sold. And it was something that like I mean, I guess we're used to it today, where if we like a movie, we'll go see it multiple times. But that was, I think, a novel concept with Star Wars, which the idea that you loved a movie so much you'd go see it in the movie theater 12, 16 times.
Well, at the time, it was the only one of its kind, though.
Exactly.
Yeah,
Now
that's
we
what's so
have
revolutionary
6.
about it. Yeah.
What was your favorite movie, Laney, of the series?
Fahrenheit
Mine
9/11.
has to be Revenge of the Sith.
Really? It's a good
yeah.
choice.
The
Of
dialogue.
the original 3, or of the
of
later 3.
the prequels. The dialogue between Anakin and Obi-Wan just always gets to me, and I know that's such a girly answer, but it's like you have these two friends that are like they
Essentially
love
brothers.
each other so much, but it's like they're so torn between like good and evil, and it's just so amazing. It always like makes me tear up.
I always think in that final scene where Obi-Wan's talking to Anakin and he says, "You were the chosen one." I always think that somewhere in heaven, Alec Guinness is going, "Damn, I wish I could deliver that line."
How do you know he's in heaven?
Yeah, that's a good question.
Yeah, but I mean, it's like it's the birth of Darth Vader. It
was the birth of Vader.
I'm sorry.
It was the birth
Yeah.
of Vader.
It's what started it all, and it's
It was actually the birth of this store
exactly.
when the Emperor gives the famous lines, right?
Spielberg was the right man for the job to actually pencil out and conduct that final scene, that final duel in Episode 3. You could see his masterpiece work in that.
Talking to
in
Mustafar
that
scenes.
piece. Yeah, that's awesome.
I've always been really intrigued, though, and I'm going to ask for your opinions. During that dialogue, Obi-Wan says to Anakin, "Only the Sith deal in absolutes." But previous to that, Yoda says, "Do or do not, there is no try." What's up with that?
Well, the thing is that's interesting about Revenge of the Sith is it shows you that there is so much the lines can be bled between good and evil. Even that whole dynamic between Anakin and Obi-Wan, there is lines that are being crossed back and forth from good and evil. And Anakin is like, being who he is and so confused at his age and so powerful but so young and so arrogant. He's tricked. I mean, basically he's tricked by the Emperor to turn to the dark side to save Padme, and then he's lost, and then he's truly lost, and that whole duel, it's like he's just confused about where the lines between good and evil are. So I think that both of them, depending on where you're at, they both deal in absolutes, even though they state that
Right.
only
Yeah, it's
Sith
like,
deal in absolutes. But that's Obi-Wan
that in
saying
itself-
that, not Yoda.
That in itself is an absolute, though. Like it's
It is.
Well, I think that I think the statements are just different because Obi-Wan's viewing how Anakin's talking as he's just everything is black and white to him. Everything is just good or evil, whereas Obi-Wan sees it as more the lines are blurred. Whereas when Yoda's talking, it's more about how you have to believe in yourself and doing your actions. And I think Chuck brought up a really good point about how Anakin was corrupted and such. Because, at least to me, essentially, how the prequel trilogy is structured in terms of Anakin's character arc, it's very similar to Citizen Kane in the way that at the beginning he's a young child and he's taken away from his home, and then he gains growth in his abilities, but eventually his power and arrogance corrupts him, and in the end he ends up becoming the one thing he wanted to destroy. And I think it was definitely an influence for Lucas, and you can definitely see that in Revenge of the Sith, and I can understand why that would be your pick.
What was your favorite?
Oh, mine is without a doubt Episode 6, Return of the Jedi. Revenge of the Jedi was the original title, and then changed to Return of the Jedi. And the reason, there are two reasons.
Keep that for another episode.
Yeah, the two reasons.
Wrath of Khan.
It is my favorite film by far. Is number one, it's the climactic end to the whole original trilogy. But I'll tell you, there's two scenes in particular. On the skiff, when R2 pops up the lightsaber on the skiff, and Luke grabs it up in the air and then lights that lightsaber for the first time, you know that he's a Jedi now. And it's awesome. I mean, even talking about it now, it just kind of gives me goosebumps. That whole sequence is awesome.
That's my favorite. That moment you just described, that's my favorite moment out of the entire original trilogy. But
even more than that is important to me. But even more than that is the biggest life lesson that I draw from Star Wars is during the final duel in Jedi, when Luke and Vader are battling, and then Luke quits, and the Emperor's trying to destroy him. He's shooting with lightning, and Vader's just standing there next to him, and he keeps looking at his son. He keeps looking at Emperor. He keeps looking at his son, and finally he picks him up and he throws the Emperor down into the core of the Death Star, destroying him. That amount of change from him being so lost in being a Sith Lord for so long to finding redemption. What it says to me and what it speaks to me is that I don't care how far or how bad things get, no one or nothing is beyond redemption. And that is awesome to me.
Which is an excellent point to make.
Well, to me, the scene in Jedi the moment in Jedi, it's around the same time when Luke and Vader are battling, and it's after Luke essentially defeats Vader, and he cuts off his arm. And then there's just that one shot of Luke looking at Vader's, where his hand or his arm used to be, and then he looks at his own hand, and he realizes it's almost the same thing as what I was talking about with the prequel trilogy, about how he becomes the thing he wished to destroy. He realizes the thing his father inflicted upon him, he inflicted upon his father. And to me, that was just such a powerful thing. And then that leads in to what happens next, and when he throws away the lightsaber, which is just, you realize his decision.
Well, for me, my favorite was probably Empire. But, the AT-ATs, the AT-STs, just the whole scene on Hoth, just phenomenal. I loved it. And then, of course, going to Dagobah and meeting Yoda for the first time, and you see the little green guy, and he's just absolutely lovable, but he's 900 years old and talks in riddle. And
when Yoda lifts that X-wing out
of absolutely,
that is awesome.
That's probably my favorite scene in the entire saga.
The original kind of goosebump moment, and then bringing it back around to the father-son thing. When Luke goes into the cave, and he goes into the cave and he has to battle Vader one-on-one, and it's a safe environment. He doesn't know that it's not Vader, but and then of course at the end when he lifts Vader's helmet off and he sees himself, it's like a precursor for the rest of the movie. Mm-hmm. It's like really great. We're running a little long today. But,
and mine was the holiday special.
Oh.
Well, would you like to give us a little
no, I think it's
something on the holiday special?
I think it's time to go. But yes, it was wonderful. Jefferson Starship was awesome.
It was.
Yeah.
In fact, without Grace Slick.
Without Grace Slick.
For those that actually
these
saw it.
these kids don't know what we're talking about. So.
Some of us do.
But again, thank you for listening. This has been episode 3 of Star Wars Order 66, Sons of the Order. My name is Jeff.
James.
Lainey.
Chuck?
Joey.
Liam.
And again, thank you. If you have any questions or you would like to send an email to be read on during the podcast, you can send that to order66unleashed@yahoo.com. We'd be happy to address your questions on the podcast. And if we do, you will receive something special from us as just a little thank you.
Well, thank you. May the force be with you.
And also with you.
Hare Krishna.